3, 2, 1, drop.
Here is the website Confinement in Quebec because of recent changes in the epidemiological situation of Quebec, except for the Cree territory of James Bay and Nunavut, will be on maximum alert red zone from January the 9th up to and including February the 8th, 2021. It goes on to talk about measures enforced indoor-outdoor visitors to homes and cottages, prohibited visitors from another address, allowed one visitor from another address for single individuals, the same person, to limit social contacts, one informal caregiver, individuals offering service support, labor for planned work. Then it goes on to state about indoor and outdoor private gatherings are prohibited. The curfew as of Saturday, January the 9th, 2021, a curfew will be in effect between 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. Quebecers must not leave their homes except in cases that justify travel. The allowed exceptions, you can see this list. A person whose presence required at the person's place of work who is transporting goods needed for ongoing activities of the person's enterprise. A person who is going to a pharmacy to obtain medication or pharmaceutical, hygienic, or sanitary products. A person who must go to or return from a hospital, clinic, or dentist, and etc. A person who must visit a sick or injured parent. A student who must participate in a face-to-face evening class or to a laboratory in a recognized school. A parent who must accompany his or her children to the home of the other parent who has custody of them. A person who is going to take an interregional or interprovincial bus, train, or plane for final travel to a person's destination. A person who must go out so that his dog can do the business within the radius of no more than 1 kilometer from the person's place of residence or temporary residence. A person must travel in order to comply with the court judgment, to respond to a summons to appear in court, or to exercise custody and access rights as a parent. A person must accompany to a medical appointment another person who is unable to drive. A parent who must accompany a sick child to the hospital. A person traveling to give blood under the supervision of HEMA Quebec. A parent must accompany adolescents to his job. Police officers will continue to ensure compliance with health measures, can intervene when individuals are outside their homes during curfew hours. Offenders are liable for the fines ranging from $1,000 to $6,000 if they are unable to adequately justify why they are outside the home. Young people 14 years of age and over are subject to a $500 fine. To enable individuals who are traveling during curfew because of their work to readily demonstrate that such travel is legitimate, employers are asked to complete the attestation d'emploi. It's all in French. And then it goes on to educational child care services. All child care services can accommodate the maximum number of children stipulated on their permit. Imagine. Recognized home child care services can accommodate the usual number of children stipulated. Education child services will be closed only in the event of an outbreak in an establishment declared by public health authorities. Attendance of children, services optional. Children cannot lose their places even if they do not attend child care service. Child care expenses remain in force, and parents must assume them whether their children attend the service. Community-based family organizations and community social pediatric centers can continue to offer services. Drop-in daycare centers remain closed. Travel between regions and cities not recommended except for essential travel. Students, workers, shared custody, and freight transportation. Goes on to talk about preschool and elementary school on their website. Preschool and elementary school students will resume classes on January the 11th according to the school calendar. It gets on to loan and rental of school premises are suspended except for child care service for the mandates of specific pedagogical projects. It talks about the secondary education. And it gets into other specifics, including adult education, occupational training, higher education, recreation, sports, travel from and to a red zone is not recommended. Sports and recreational activities must from now on be limited to a family bubble. You always use that family bubble thing. You noticed? Activities such as walking, downhill skiing, cross-country skiing will not be tolerated if they do not occur in groups. Downhill ski resorts will remain open to those who offer night skiing. Must stop activities at 7:30 p.m. until February the 8th, inclusive to report curfew. Cannot offer night skiing until February the 8th. Now it goes on to the 𝐔𝐍𝐏𝐑𝐄𝐂𝐄𝐃 and private seniors home, which I did not include on here, I don't think, up on the screen. Consult the measures to apply for it. Page to find out the measures that apply to different situations. Visit humanitarian purposes allowed. Visits by informal caregivers, 1 caregiver per day, maximum 2 caregivers can be identified by the resident to have access to the facility during the confinement period. Closing of non-priority commercial enterprises, that's on their website. And it goes on to say that as of January 9th, 2021, to comply with an 8 p.m. curfew, all commercial enterprises must close their doors no later than 7:30 p.m. During the curfew, the pharmacies and service stations will remain open, the same schedule as mandated. Manufacturers and construction companies are to reduce the complete commitments. Office space in all regions. Teleworking is mandatory for people working in offices December 17th up to including February the 8th. Restaurants, dining rooms are closed. Delivery, takeout, drive-through orders only. Bars and taverns and casinos closed. Activities organized in public space prohibited except for funerals, a maximum of 25 people excluding the staff of the funeral establishment and volunteers inside and outside the building. Audiences in indoor public places, auditoriums, cinemas, theaters, museums are closed. Circulation desks and workplaces are open. Personal and beauty services closed until February the 8th. Private professional health services closed unless they require an individual's presence. Community organization services maintained. Other long-term measures, broader police interventions, offense reports, and fines will be issued to individuals who fail to comply with these measures. And it goes on to say, information on this website is no way replaces the opinion of a health professional. If you have questions concerning your health status, consult a professional. And again, if you go to www.quebec.ca/en, and I'm going to include that here at the bottom of the screen, permanently at the bottom of this screen, and I just wanted to notify you guys what's going on up in Quebec. And remember to keep looking up for Redemption 12:9. Jesus is the way, the truth, and life. No one can come to the Father but through him.
Getting news from Pakistan now. There's been a massive power outage in the country. The country plunged into darkness late last night after a huge blackout caused by a power grid failure. Pakistan's power minister took to Twitter and he said electricity blackout in the country is due to the sudden drop in frequency in power transmission system from 50 to 0. He assured that attempts were being made to determine the cause that led to the frequency drop. Pradeep is with us for more on this. Pradeep, we are given to understand that this probably was the worst power outage in the history of the country.
About disaster. Right now, just a few hundred miles away from here in Florida, thousands of people sit without electricity. Imagine what that's like. You walk outside, you turn on your phone, there's no signal. You go back inside, you turn on the TV, no signal. You turn on the radio, no power. You turn on the faucet, no water. You turn on the fridge, no refrigeration, your food starts to spoil. You walk outside, cars pile up, no streetlights. In big cities, if you're in New York, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, DC, within 3 to 5 days, the food is gone from the grocery stores. And the trucks that the city counts on to resupply that food aren't coming. Within a week or two, the sewage system starts to overflow and contaminates what remains of the water supply, and people start getting cholera. Societal order starts to break down. There's mass evacuations. The emergency responders who during the first few days were desperately trying to evacuate people trapped in elevators have now left their positions, like many did during Katrina, to protect themselves and their own families. But why get depressed and worry about something like that if there's no way it could ever happen? If there's no way we could ever experience a large blackout affecting the entire or a large portion of the United States of America. The unfortunate news is that the threat of such a blackout is very real. Now, there are a few things that we all know could disrupt life as we know it and make it very bad. Nuclear war, asteroid collision, aliens invading, a horrific disease pandemic, a giant plague. And when we think about those things, we get scared because they'd be very bad, but then we get comforted because there's a really small percentage chance they happen, and they're almost definitely not going to. And then we figure, you know what, it's not worth even thinking about this stuff because there's no
Buongiorno, Ciro Verdoliva, ore 7:25 dell'8 gennaio 2021. Chiamato ore 6:45 dal comandante guardia giurata Giovanni De Simone, riporto sul posto dove già i vigili del fuoco, voragine aperta a seguito, mi riferiscono, di una grande esplosione. Ci sono alcune auto all'interno della voragine, i vigili del fuoco provvederanno a verificare eventuale presenza di persone, i tecnici sono sul posto e stiamo iniziando ad organizzare la chiusura degli impianti.
Plástico. Meu Deus, cara.
The chilling threat, obtained exclusively by CBS News, was heard by multiple air traffic controllers on Monday afternoon in New York.
We are flying a plane into the Capitol Wednesday. Soleimani will be avenged.
Sources tell CBS News the Pentagon and other agencies were briefed today about the digitized voice recording and believe it was designed to suggest hitting the Capitol on the same day Congress is set to count the Electoral College.
Che, qué fuerte que está esto, boludo. Agarrala, boludo.
Ay, Dios mío, poderoso. Dios mío. Ay, Señor. Ay, Dios mío. Ay, Señor, Dios mío, Dios mío. Ay, Dios mío, poderoso. Ay, Dios, ay, Señor.
Vatican blackout. Pope arrested on 80 counts of child trafficking and fraud. It seems Pope Francis tweeted this morning, however, conservative Beaver confirmed that Pope Francis has a social media team that schedules his publications, and this was planned ahead of time. If you click on the tweet, you can see that the tweet deck was used to schedule the post. Pope Francis is still in federal custody in Italy, so he hasn't been seen on video. The FBI is on their way for interrogation, according to sources. On with this, military officials, Italian police and his sexual offenses unit went to the Pope's house in the Vatican and arrested him and several other senior officials and put them all under arrest without incident. People near the scene had reported hearing shots fired, but the police did not confirm if they were the ones who fired the guns. Pope Francis is currently in an unknown prison, according to resources, being questioned by federal agents working for the state of Italy and Interpol. The FBI is reportedly making arrangements to fly and question him once Interpol is done with him. Giuseppe Governale, Italy's chief anti-mafia prosecutor, was called at the beginning of the investigation into Pope Francis and others within the Vatican. He said that the group was underrated and particularly dangerous because of its ability to proliferation and infiltrate all nations. In order to make the arrest, the police and military officers had to cut power in the Vatican as well as dim the camera live. This was noticed by web sleuths, who quickly began to suspect what was happening in the Vatican. And that's the news on that. And this news was given out by La Humanidad Perfecta. That's the name of the person that put it out. I've been hearing this news from other people, so I guess it's legit. We'll find out.
District officials were asked to shut all unlicensed poultry markets for 10 days after around 70 birds were found dead in different parts of Delhi on Sunday. There are several unlicensed poultry markets, where supply comes from Haryana and Uttar Pradesh, in some parts of the city. So far, no confirmed cases of bird flu have been registered in Delhi. More than 120 complaints were received on the bird flu helpline number set up by the government since Sunday morning. At least 68 dead birds were found and 12 samples were collected and sent for tests, said a Delhi government source. Delhi government has already imposed a ban on live birds import and shut down the Ghazipur wholesale poultry market in the wake of avian flu outbreak across the country.
Part of that effort to vaccinate through churches. 8 on your side's Nico Clemens shows us hundreds of people received a dose of hope today.
Health officials in Hillsborough County know last week was challenging for many people, but they want people to know every dose of the vaccine that comes into the county will go out immediately.
This thing is real. It's very real.
Burton Hamilton was like many people last week, searching all over for a COVID-19 vaccine. Appointments in Hillsborough County filled fast. Luckily, he got his spot in line at St. John Progressive Missionary Baptist Church on Sunday.
Pretty fast, right? Compared to some people say they're waiting all day, and right? It's about 40 minutes.
The Florida Department of Health in Hillsborough County prepared to give out 500 vaccinations Sunday.
At my age and time, too, I don't want to get COVID-19.
Dr. Douglas Holt says last week the department gave vaccinations to almost 9,000 people. Right now, they're going to places where people need the vaccine the most and have the least access to a vaccine. He says the department expects more doses this week, but he's asking people to remain patient.
No vaccine will be left. If it comes in this county, we're getting it out.
Holt also highlighted the importance of getting communities of color vaccinated. He says they're at greater risk of getting infected and are more vulnerable to more severe infections.
It is essential that our communities of color be the first round.
Hamilton is now looking forward to his second dose, but he's not letting his guard down.
I feel more energized, more super now since I got it, but I'm still not going to go with it this though.
And Dr. Holt says the plan is to open up more appointment times this week. In
The state
newsroom,
is
I'm Nico
currently
Clemens,
vaccinating
on your
people
side.
under Phase 1A here in Kentucky, which includes those in long-term care facilities and healthcare workers. But one Lexington doctor tells our Sophia Millar it's been a challenge finding the information she needs to get her own employees vaccinated.
Dr. Erin Cooper says the COVID-19 vaccine immediately took a heavy weight off her shoulders.
When my husband and I got that first shot, it was the first breath of relief that we've had in almost a year. I mean, I think we felt like, okay, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. This is really exciting. We're moving toward getting back to normal.
Dr. Cooper works part-time for a healthcare company in Pulaski County. It's what got her in line for the vaccine. But as the owner of Olive Health Direct Primary Care in Lexington, Cooper says she hasn't been as successful getting her own staff vaccinated.
For us to continue to stay safe and take care of people, that vaccine is critical.
Cooper says it's been a month-long battle finding information about where to sign up her medical assistant for the vaccine. And when she asks, she says the responses are lackluster.
And yes, I can check the websites all day long, but until I can hear a direct plan from my health department or my mayor or, my local government, it doesn't do me a lot of good to check the website every day when there's nothing there.
The Lexington-Fayette County Health Department recently published a form on their website for healthcare organizations eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine to get notifications about future vaccine clinics. It's not a spot in line for the vaccine, but Dr. Cooper says she hopes the more specific information will bring her closer to the answers she's been looking for. In Lexington, Sophia Millar, LEX 18 News.
You can find the Lexington-Fayette County Health Department's COVID-19 vaccination notification form on their website. We've got a link at LEX18.
This is an Arizona's Family News Update.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Whitney Clark. Here are the latest stories we are following this Sunday night from the Arizona's Family Newsroom. Cases have surpassed 90 million in the U.S., and Arizona remains a nationwide hotspot. State health officials report 11,201 new cases in our state. The total number of known cases has surpassed 618,000. Sadly, we've learned 105 additional people have died from coronavirus complications, meaning 10,141 Arizonans have died since the outbreak began here. State Farm Stadium opens tomorrow as a 24-hour COVID-19 vaccination site. State health officials say the goal is to vaccinate thousands of people a day. Monday afternoon, it will actually open for law enforcement and other protective service workers. Appointments for others in Phase 1B and 1A will then be available starting Tuesday. Registration information will be posted on the AZDHS website in the morning. We're not sure on the exact time. And Maricopa County will open vaccination appointments at its distribution points for Phase 1B prioritized groups starting tomorrow. This includes teachers, law enforcement officers, and those over the age of 75. You can't sign up just yet. Registration will go live at 6 a.m. on Monday on the county's website. This group includes hundreds of people, thousands of people, and appointments will be limited to start. Slots will be available at sites that are not already booked for those in Phase 1A who are getting their second doses. If you or anyone you know needs help signing up, call 211 and an actual real person can help. Also tomorrow, Governor Doug Ducey will deliver his annual State of the State address virtually. Ducey has traditionally used his address on the first day of the legislative session to tout his successes and lay out his priorities for the budget in the coming year. Arizona's Family will be live streaming it on our website, azfamily.com, tomorrow.
Good evening, everybody. Let's take a look outside. We have a beautiful week ahead of us. Monday through Wednesday is going to be in the mid to upper 60s. Lows will hover around upper 30s and low 40s, but Thursday through Saturday, we are looking at mid to upper 70s, flirting with 80 degrees on Friday with a high of 79. No chance of rain in the forecast, but plenty of sunshine.
All right, for more updates on stories throughout the night, you can always download the Arizona's Family News app and check out our app on your Roku device. I'm Whitney Clark. Have a good night. Sticking with us tonight at 6:30, I'm Jackie Kostek. We begin with news out of Nye County, where the Republican Party is doubling down on their claims that Donald Trump won the 2020 election over Joe Biden. A letter claimed to be written by party chairman Chris Zimmerman and posted to the Nye County GOP website says, quote, Trump will be president for another 4 years. Biden will not be president, end quote. The letter goes on to say that President Trump never actually conceded the election, but said only that there will be a peaceful transition to a new administration. Now, Zimmerman takes that to mean that President Trump will remain in office while bringing on a new vice president and cabinet, calling those people traitors. Now, you can see the full letter on our website right now at ktnv.com.
New tonight, at least 3 arrests were made after a rally in Eugene turned violent. The CBS station in Eugene reports it was a pro-Trump rally. Police say counter-protesters were also in the area outside the federal courthouse. We're told at one point there was a fight involving sticks and 70 people rushed towards it. Police declared an unlawful assembly and said they did not use tear gas or any other crowd munitions. There were no reports of any serious injuries.
11 patients are currently being treated at Sleep Train Arena, 8 fewer patients from last weekend. The former Kings facility is one of several field hospitals around the state.
The Alabama Department of Public Health reported more than 1 million calls on the first day of the COVID-19 vaccine hotline. And viewers have reached out to us in regards to long wait times and having issues getting through for information. Gabby Easterwood is joining us live from the Mobile County Health Department with the latest. Good evening, Gabby.
Good evening, Amber. And like you just said, over 300,000 Alabamians by January 18th are going to be able to get the COVID-19 vaccine. But of course, they have to make an appointment first. And the way they do that is to call the ADPH hotline. But all of those viewers who've reached out to us say they haven't been able to get through yet.
But it was 820 times, did not get through at all.
An unsettling amount of times, Judy Persons has tried to call the hotline to set up an appointment for her 82-year-old husband.
It'll sound like the call's going through, and it rings and rings and rings. And after it rings about 10 or 12 times, it just cuts me off.
And we had the same luck when we tried to get through.
I think it's a little silly that there's only one number for every person in the state to call. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think they would have set it up more people, more lines or something.
One of the problems the ADPH is seeing with these high call volumes are people who are not currently eligible for the vaccine still calling the hotline. Those in phase 1B, part of the newly eligible.
That's a lot of vaccines, a lot of injections to be given. So it's really going to take the private doctors, the pharmacies, the hospitals, and everybody working together.
Since that busy signal seems to be widespread, the ADPH says a lot of overflow calls have been going to local hospitals, including those here in the Mobile area. In a message today, they said in part, quote, please do not call your local hospital directly to set up appointments to be scheduled to receive your COVID-19 vaccine. We have learned that hospital switchboards are being overwhelmed with calls, which is creating an obstacle to patient care. Overall, things are still in the early stages, and patience is key.
A slower start than probably a lot of people want, but we do not want to be like in Florida where people are waiting in lines for hours and then not being able to get vaccine.
Now, we did reach out to the Alabama Department of Public Health on what their plan is moving forward when it comes to these high call volumes and those not being able to get through to the hotline, but they were not available for comment. Reporting live in downtown Mobile, I'm Gabby Easterwood, WKRG News 5.
All right, thanks, Gabby, for that update. Now, we've been keeping you updated on the ADPH vaccination hotline on our free WKRG News app. Get up-to-date alerts like this one sent to your phone. It's free in the App Store and on Google Play.
The nationwide dragnet underway to locate those involved in Wednesday's insurrection at the Capitol includes law enforcement efforts in North Texas. And an FBI poster shows a person in the Capitol whom the New Yorker has identified as a Grapevine man. Fox 4's David September joins us with the story. David?
Yeah, Blake, multiple family members and a friend of Larry Brock tell the New Yorker that he had become, quote, increasingly radicalized, and that he posted on social media about his plans to travel to Washington, D.C. for President Trump's rally. The FBI is seeking information on at least the dozens of people seen in these photos, and one of them is retired Lieutenant Colonel Larry Rendell Brock Jr., an Air Force Academy graduate and combat veteran, according to The New Yorker, who lives right here in North Texas.
And he had a very authoritative, firm tone, and that's why I noticed it as I was walking on by.
Steve Glann lives in the Grapevine apartment complex where records show Brock lives. In fact, he says he overheard Brock speaking to someone Saturday about keeping their cool, saying,
"And you need to be civil."
But there's really nothing civil about what Brock's accused of: rioting inside the Capitol in combat gear while carrying zip ties. ITV News images appear to show Brock leaving House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office. Brock denied doing so to The New Yorker. His neighbor is disappointed.
I don't think anything that I could say right now, and probably what he would say right now, would be constructive.
Brock was working for Hillwood Airways in Fort Worth, which is part of the Perot family empire, headed by Ross Perot Jr. But the aviation company says Saturday he's no longer employed. Fox 4 attempted to speak with him at his listed address, but we didn't have access to get past the gate. No person answered when we called and texted his listed cell number, and an employee at the leasing office declined to comment. Brock could face criminal charges. The FBI has already arrested others who breached the Capitol.
Some of them are not wearing masks and some are.
Retired FBI Special Agent Gil Torres says new age technology like facial recognition software will assist the FBI's efforts.
I think that this in itself was unique. However, we have had large venues. I mean, look at Charlottesville.
He believes there have always been groups wanting to rebel against the government, but
it doesn't always show its ugly face.
Brock's neighbor blames what he calls disinformation on social media that might be radicalizing some to the point of crashing the Capitol.
If those sources are not honest and reliable, then you're going to end up with more conflict in the future. And I'd like to suggest this could have been 10 times worse.
David Centendry, Fox 4 News. And FBI Dallas released a statement yesterday.
Sign posted outside a diner in Alston says that mask mandates will not be enforced. The owner says he's just trying to make a statement. In fact, he says workers inside the Breakfast Club are following all of the rules. But one city official says he's setting a bad example, as WBZ's Mike LaCrosse tells us.
The meeting's just, we're not going to be pushed around. We can't be pushed around.
The Breakfast Club owner, George Athanasopoulos, posted a sign outside his Alston diner informing customers why they don't have to wear a mask inside.
It's more or less just show the puff of Governor Baker, like, listen, you can't make us not do this.
The mask exemption sign says if you have a health condition, you don't have to wear a mask. And since the staff can't legally ask someone about their health, they assume anyone without a mask has a condition and is welcome.
Are you worried about any sort of fines if inspectional services do come back and people aren't wearing masks?
Not at all.
Breakfast Club, how can I help you?
Athanasopoulos says it's just a statement and that in reality people are coming in with masks and his staff all wear masks as well. He says he's more upset with the extension of restrictions on small businesses.
It's back down to the 25% that the governor announced 2 weeks ago, and then, and that's killing us.
The Boston City Councilor who represents this district says signs like this send a bad message.
And this is a serious virus that we're dealing with, and it requires that everyone try and adhere to the public health guidelines as best they can.
A city inspector showed up at the diner today following a complaint about the sign. An inspectional report shows the business does have several violations that are not related to the coronavirus. The report notes all staff and customers were wearing masks and that COVID-19 guidelines were being followed.
We're doing all the safety protocols, which we did from day one.
Thank you so much.
In Alston, Mike LaCrosse, WBZ News.
We've seen a series of developments from House Democrats today, really aimed at trying to control Donald Trump in his final days of office or move to remove him from office. So we have seen Nancy Pelosi reach out to General Milley, he's the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to say that she thinks that controls should be put in place to try to prevent Trump from using nuclear weapons or taking some other kind of large military action in his final days. And we've just learned that Milley, in response to Pelosi, said, in fact, that steps are being taken on the nuclear front. We don't know exactly what those details are, but clearly this is a conversation that is not just happening among political figures and lawmakers. This is happening at the top reaches of the Pentagon. And I think the thing that links all of this together is just uncertainty. People really not knowing and being nervous about what could happen over these next 12 days. And so nobody wants to take the risk of leaving options on the table. They really want to make sure that they are prepared in case we get to a point where the president does take some kind of extreme action, that there are controls and plans in place to deal with that. On the impeachment side, we do see Democrats in the House moving fairly aggressively to try to pass articles of impeachment. But this would really come down to Mitch McConnell, whether he decides he would move on a conviction. And I do think that one of the things that Republicans are considering right now is how much that action actually could inflame the situation in the country. Is it riskier to have Trump stay in office for 12 more days, or is it riskier actually to the country and to so many of these partisan tensions that we have seen to take that really extraordinary step at this time?
And new tonight, social media companies are cracking down on posts that promote violence. Parler, the app that has become popular among many supporters of President Trump, has been cut off. Apple and Google removed Parler from their app stores for failing to moderate content that incites violence. And Amazon says it is removing the app from its web hosting service for violating its terms of service.
With just days left in President Trump's term, congressional Democrats are preparing to bring articles of impeachment against him as early as Monday.
KPIX 5's Devin Feely spoke with two Bay Area Congress members about the strategy, including one who prosecuted the president the last time.
The remedies we have in front of us legally are impeachment or the 25th Amendment.
Congressman Mark DeSaulnier joined a growing number of his Democratic colleagues and a handful of Republicans calling for the president to resign or be removed from office one way or another.
He tried to overturn American democracy and install himself as the leader. And these people were willing to do his work.
It would be historic for all of the wrong reasons for President Trump to face impeachment twice in the span of a single term. Democratic leaders have drafted an article of impeachment, incitement to insurrection, for the president's role in egging on the rioters who stormed the Capitol Wednesday.
I think it's very clear that the president incited this violence.
Representative Zoe Lofgren was one of the House managers who prosecuted the case against the president in the first impeachment. A second one, she says, may be necessary to keep an increasingly erratic and isolated president in check in his final days in office.
And if we impeach him, that is something that Mitch McConnell has in his pocket that he can threaten him with if he needs to.
Democrats had favored a removal of the president via the 25th Amendment and a majority vote of his cabinet. But political analysts say that prospect is unlikely, especially given several high-profile departures from the cabinet in recent days.
They are so fearful of going one way or the other that they're actually stepping away just days before their term of office ends.
Devin Feely, KPIX 5.
Tonight, President-elect Joe Biden says he is leaving the impeachment question up to Congress.
Look, I've thought for a long, long time that President Trump wasn't fit to hold the job. What the Congress decides to do is for them to decide.
Meanwhile, the president and the president-elect do appear to have found some common ground on one issue, the upcoming inauguration.
One of the few things he and I have ever agreed on. It's a good thing I'm not showing up.
What about the vice president?
He's welcome. I think it's important that as much as we can stick to what have been the historical precedents of how and the circumstances in which an administration changes should be maintained.
Now, some congressional Republicans have also signaled that impeachment is something that they would consider, but with just over 10 days before the White House changes hands, some say there's
2 News is your vaccine central, and it's a question that many people are asking us. Can your employer require you to get the coronavirus shot once it's available to you?
Channel 2 investigator Robert Arnold reports on your rights tonight. And will you be able to keep your job if you refuse the vaccine?
Just when I thought I had a plan, just when I thought I had things figured out.
COVID hit Molly Wynn's baking business hard.
I found out that we couldn't even go to the store. There were shortages of ingredients.
Wynn was able to navigate the hurdles and get her home-based business humming again. She even brought on a friend and co-owner.
I used to work at a company called Vanderbloemen, and due to COVID, half the company got laid off, and I was one of them.
Both are eager to return to a sense of normality, which means both have to decide whether that return includes getting the vaccine.
My mom being in her 60s, almost 70, she plans 100% on getting the vaccine, and so I'm just going to go get it with her when she does.
In order for us to be able to interact with each other and safely handle food and provide food for others and safely gather, then you got to do what you got to do.
While getting the vaccine is ultimately a personal choice, when it comes to your job, can an employer force an employee to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
Well, generally, yes, they can.
Sophia George is a civil litigator with the Germer Law Firm. She says the law generally backs employers who make vaccines mandatory, especially when the greater public's health is at stake.
If you are working with what we would consider a high-risk population, an employer has a much better argument in requiring their employees take the COVID-19 vaccination.
However, George says there are exceptions. The Civil Rights Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act cover those who have documented medical or religious reasons for not getting a vaccine. If you are covered by these federal laws,
your employer is required to make some sort of accommodation for you.
If you are not covered by one of these acts but are against getting the vaccine,
if you do have an employer who requires this vaccine and you might not want to take it, I do recommend you reach out to an attorney and see what your options are.
Channel 2 Investigates reached out to dozens of companies, everything from grocery stores to healthcare. None we spoke with say they'll make the vaccine mandatory. Some, like H-E-B and Home Depot, told us they will help employees get the vaccine when available, just like they do during flu season. Methodist Hospital is even offering $500 bonuses to healthcare workers who get the vaccine. Schools are also ramping up efforts.
Our priority is to vaccinate the school staff.
Angie Brown is executive director of the Teen Health Center, which has partnered with Galveston ISD to set up 5 vaccination clinics on school campuses.
We expect to get our first shipment of vaccine in mid-January.
Something else to consider when it comes to vaccines in your job, even if an employer does not make it mandatory.
Here in the tri-state, new vaccines are also being tested. And it's really, of course, a race against time, getting shots in the arms as the COVID-19 death toll climbs. Amid the vaccine rollout, state leaders and local health officials alike have expressed frustration about struggles to meet the demand.
But scientists in Cincinnati are working to change that. WCPO 9 News reporter Kristen Swilley shares what they're doing to bring new vaccines online.
Vaccines from AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson could get emergency use authorization in the next several weeks. And some of the research being done for AstraZeneca is happening right here at Cincinnati Children's Hospital.
Within a couple months, I think we're going to have plenty of vaccine.
That's because 2 more companies are fighting to join the ranks of Pfizer and Moderna.
I'm really expecting that AstraZeneca vaccine will have that EUA by the end of this month.
Johnson & Johnson, which only requires 1 dose, is expected to apply in February. And if they get that emergency use authorization, the shots could give vaccine rollout a much-needed shot in the arm.
Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Janssen have all said that by the end of the year they can each produce about 1 billion doses of vaccine.
Dr. Robert Frank, director of the Vaccine Research Center at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, says there are about 1,000 people enrolled in the vaccine studies, which started in the spring of last year. So far, side effects have been rare and mild.
There's absolutely no evidence that the vaccine is associated with infertility at all. There's also no evidence that the vaccine incorporates in your DNA. That's what people have been worried about, that it changes your genetic material. That does not happen.
He says the bigger battle won't be supply, but demand, as many worry about safety. Frank warns COVID-19 itself remains the far greater threat.
That's why the vaccines are so critical, is because that's the way we're going to break this cycle. That's the way we're going to get back to normal.
Frank says there could be a vaccine licensed for children 12 years and up who usually get mild cases themselves but could pass the virus on to more at-risk groups. At Cincinnati Children's Hospital, Kristen Swilley, WCPO 9 News.
Twitter silenced President Donald Trump tonight. They have banned his personal account, citing risks to further incitement of violence. Twitter initially suspended Trump's account for 12 hours.
Well, now the ban deprives Mr. Trump of a potent tool that we all know he's used to communicate directly with the American people longer than a decade. And our political specialist Sean Boyd reports the calls for the president's impeachment are getting louder.
The House could vote on impeachment as early as next week, but the president indicated he plans on being in power for 12 more days. He's promising a seamless transition, yet he hasn't conceded and now says he will not attend President-elect Biden's inauguration.
A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th.
In a videotaped statement, President Trump acknowledged for the first time he will no longer be the president as of January 20th. But if Democrats have their way, he could be removed before then.
This is urgent. This is emergency of the highest magnitude.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi says if the vice president and Trump's cabinet don't invoke the 25th Amendment, the House will move to impeach him next week. Congressman Ken Buck called it a political stunt.
It was a mistake for Republican leadership to try to overturn the results of the Electoral College. It's a mistake for the Democrat leadership to try to impeach this president. I'm tired of Democrats pointing at Trump and his supporters and saying that they are burning down this country when the Democrats continue to stoke the fires of division.
Buck says if President-elect Biden wants to reduce partisan rhetoric, he should oppose impeachment. Trump, who said this to his supporters on the day of the attack,
"We love you. You're very special,"
is now condemning what they did.
"To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country."
Meanwhile, fallout continues. The Secretaries of Education and Transportation have resigned, and the Capitol Police Chief and Senate Sergeant-at-Arms also stepped down amid outrage over security failures. And flags are at half-staff for a police officer who collapsed and died after the rioting. Impeaching the president is a long shot, and Congressman Buck says it's not something you rush in the final days. Sean Boyd covering Colorado First.
As some Granite State healthcare workers are receiving their second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, other first responders are now getting their first.
Very safe vaccine. I received it myself earlier this week. Had a sore arm, and that's really about it.
At state-run vaccination sites, paramedics with American Medical Response have been rolling up their sleeves for the past 2 weeks. About 90% of AMR's staff will have their first shot by the end of next week.
I'm really encouraged that that many of our staff have received the vaccine. Very low level number of people who are not interested in getting it.
Despite that, AMR Regional Director Chris Stawaz says all the precautions they take every day will remain in place.
Our supply of PPE is really good right now, and we hope that with the vaccine it'll stay that way, but you'll be seeing us in masks for at least 2021.
It's the same story at the Manchester Fire Department, which isn't requiring the vaccine, but says most of its firefighters have received their first dose.
We've had over 10% of our workforce actually come down with COVID. We've had 2 members hospitalized. We've had members of their families hospitalized. So it's important that we take every step.
First responders hoping to prevent infection among each other as well as those they serve.
Personally, I think it's worth it, and judging from the number of men and women who have gotten it in our organization, I think it's going to be worthwhile.
Gas leak in Cedar Park forced businesses to evacuate and closed a major roadway in that area. It was the area of Brushy Creek Road, and that's on U.S. Highway near U.S. Highway 183. A Cedar Park police spokesperson said a road construction crew hit a gas line. Now, crews shut down traffic along north and southbound Bell Boulevard. The closure affected businesses along that road.
We've just been kind of limping along, trying to get food to our customers the best we can when they can't get to us. Just a small business trying to stay floating right now.
The effort to get the COVID-19 vaccine to as many people as possible continues this weekend. The Cincinnati Health Department set up a temporary distribution site at the College Hill Rec Center Saturday.
Wear the mask. Do the distancing.
While Jeanette Dillard sat and waited after getting her first dose of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine, she said she hopes the community can come together to beat the virus.
But this COVID is something that we really, really need to look at and take it serious. It's killing too many people.
There's a lot of people dying from COVID. If you read the studies, this vaccine helps. This vaccine does not kill, and we know what COVID does.
Virginia Scott knows firsthand just how deadly COVID-19 can be. 11 of her family members and 10 of her friends have tested positive for the virus since the pandemic started.
Out of those 23, I have buried 3. We buried my uncle a week before Thanksgiving. It is very important.
Scott is the director of nursing for the Cincinnati Health Department. It administered the COVID-19 vaccine to people in Ohio's Phase 1A, which includes healthcare workers and some other groups. As Ohio's rollout expands to Phase 1B, the state says it will communicate with local health departments Monday about expectations and is instructing local emergency management agencies to update the community Wednesday and Thursday about who can get the vaccine and where. And as it becomes available to more people, Scott is encouraging African Americans to sign up, despite some of the reservations and concerns she's hearing from that community.
Anyone, if you think about what's going on with your own personal condition, you need this vaccine.
I think little by little we will conquer this, and I'm hoping it will be soon.
The Cincinnati Health Department says as this vaccine rollout continues, it will continue to have events like this throughout the community in an attempt to bring the vaccine to the people. Reporting in College Hill, Josh Bazan, WCPO 9 News.
Begin the process to impeach President Donald Trump. That is what more than 2,000 political science professors are asking in a letter. They have sent the letter to Vice President Pence, Congress, and President Trump's cabinet. It cites Trump's efforts to change the outcome of the November election and his past efforts against a peaceful transition of power. It also accuses him of inciting riots Wednesday on Capitol Hill. A political science professor emeritus at Manchester University has added his name to the letter. He says recent actions go far beyond those that led to the president's impeachment in 2020.
We need to draw kind of an important moral and political line and to say that this goes too far. It deserves removal from office, and it deserves as well a vote by the Senate to prohibit him from seeking federal office in the future. I think it is that serious that it merits that.
Another professor from Northeast Indiana has also signed the letter, joining others across the state.
Also new tonight, we have obtained a copy of a petition submitted to lawmakers seeking to impeach Governor Andy Beshear. Now, the letter was drafted by 4 citizens of Kentucky asking for 7 House members to be appointed to an impeachment inquiry committee. The petitioners say they wish to present evidence before the committee to support articles of impeachment against Beshear.
Well, tonight we have a bit of an odd story out of Lincoln County. A bad storm last year brought down power lines that unfortunately killed some cows that were underneath, and it cost a man more than $3,000. The big question, though, was who's responsible for paying for it. One viewer reached out to WCNC Charlotte's Bill McGinty for help on this one.
Yeah, most definitely. This is really an odd story, but the basis of it is really just a very simple insurance claim. It was a stormy day. The date, October 29, 2020. What was left of Hurricane Zeta was rolling through the Carolinas. These kinds of storms can do all kinds of damage, like down trees, power poles, and the very dangerous power lines. The latter happened in Lincoln County, the radar showing rough weather and high winds roaring through. And the outcome wasn't good for Billy Lynch, who owns a pasture where there was livestock.
What it is vacant land. I have no power on that property, so I'm not actually even a Duke Power customer. The other poles on the property have been replaced several years ago. Why that particular one wasn't replaced at that time, I have no idea.
That pole Billy mentioned was rotted and came down in the storm, bringing down with it live power lines. 3 cattle, one of them pregnant, were all electrocuted.
No tree limb fell and broke the power lines. It was simply just a rotten pole.
When Billy contacted Duke, he was referred to a third-party vendor that handles insurance claims. That vendor told Billy the storm was nature, an act of God, and that they were not responsible for the cattle. Billy saw it differently.
I don't see where it was my responsibility that their pole fell and electrocuted my cattle when neither one of us had anything to do with, trees falling on it.
Billy just wanted the insurance vendor to take another look at this case and see that weather really wasn't the only culprit here. It needed to include the rotted pole. He emailed me asking for help, and I emailed Duke Energy, asking them to intervene and take another look at this, since it was their vendor denying the claim. Duke immediately stepped up, investigated, and brought about a quick solution.
We were happy to have the opportunity to look into this issue further and ultimately make it right with the customer.
Duke Energy then contacted Billy to let him know they would make good on his loss. The cattle were worth $3,500.
We come up with a settlement that was, for both of us, and it's done. This, like I say, this has been going on since October, and you got it handled for me within 24 hours.
So here's the takeaway from this story. If you have what you think is a rotted pole on your property, it's a great idea to let Duke Energy know about it. I'm your consumer investigative reporter, Bill McGinty, WCNC Charlotte.
Yeah, Bill getting results there. And here's some perspective for that story. Duke Energy tells us they have around 240,000 poles in the Charlotte area.
So as we fight for this vaccine, President-elect Joe Biden has a plan to speed that up. Right now, Operation Warp Speed mandates that they hold back some of the vaccine supply to make sure that states have enough for that second dose. Well, instead, Biden wants to see those released and get as many people their first shot as soon as possible. But 10 Tampa Bay's Madison Allworth talked to local experts who say it's not a perfect plan.
The goal is to get people vaccinated as quickly as possible, but lack of doses is not the issue.
Right now, it's not a supply issue. It's a logistics, manpower issue. We need more vaccination centers. We need more vaccination hours. We need a better way to do this.
According to the CDC, 29.4 million doses of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines have been distributed. But only about 5.9 million of those vaccines have gone into Americans' arms.
The bottleneck has not been getting the vaccine to the state, it's been getting the vaccine to the people. So if that's where the bottleneck is, then then Biden's plan won't really help us, will it?
We have seen the problem firsthand in Tampa Bay, with many people having issues just signing up to get the vaccine, thanks to crashing websites and long wait times on phone calls, to name a few problems.
Because they're not ramping up the speed at which they're vaccinating. So just having them available doesn't make the vaccination plan any better.
Biden's plan also doesn't make it clear how second doses of the vaccine would be handled.
It doesn't sound like they want to try to change the schedules or dosing or anything like that. Maybe force the manufacturers to keep up.
But if production can't keep up, it could cause a real problem.
So I think we need to have as many people fully protected as possible, and not just a bunch of people who are partially protected.
Not only to fight the virus, but also to prevent new strains from developing.
But it's exactly like the problem we have with antibiotic resistance. And you may end up with a variant that now can evade the immunity that you get from these vaccines, and that would be terrible.
President-elect Biden will release more information about his vaccine distribution plan next week. The announcement is expected to elaborate on federally supported vaccination sites and distribution to rural areas.
And Fox News learning more about the Alabama man killed during the breach on Capitol Hill.
55-year-old Kevin Greason of Athens suffering from a medical emergency during the siege. His family says he was a huge Trump supporter with health issues, and he died of a heart attack.
Now, D.C. police tweeting that a 34-year-old Georgia woman and a 50-year-old Pennsylvania man also suffering medical emergencies and died. Another woman shot and killed during a standoff with Capitol Police. Following the unrest, Fox News catching up with a local Trump supporter who organized a bus trip to D.C.
Yeah, he's going to describe what he saw from the Capitol steps in the minutes leading up to the chaos. Fox 10's Hal Sherrick with the story.
Let's see if we can squeeze in Bobby from Summerdale. Bobby, what do you got?
Some may know Pete Ream. He's a staunch conservative, constitutionalist, and an avid Trump supporter. He has his own weekly radio show called Common Sense Radio. His recent trip to D.C. didn't go as expected. Like many others from around the country, Rehm and his group from our area went to the Capitol to speak out against the certification of the Electoral College vote. Pete says he personally didn't witness any violence, but describes what he saw leading up to the chaos.
We watched the Capitol Police, about a dozen of them, and they'd take a couple steps up, and then the crowd would take a couple steps up, and they would take a couple steps, and I turned around one time, turned back, because I'm trying to count the group, and the Capitol Police were gone, and as soon as they were gone, the crowd was on the steps going, oh, look, we can add the steps, so they flooded up onto the steps, filled the 2 porticos.
Rehm spent the morning filling in for Jeff Poor on 106.5 Talk Radio, taking calls and talking with the audience about the experience in D.C. At one point, he says he saw abandoned, fallen barricades, which the crowds were going through. It was on the walk back to the bus when Rehm says he heard something disturbing.
Now, as we were walking away, we did hear a couple of flashbang grenades, but I also knew, hey, huge crowd. There's always somebody shows up that's a little more unruly than you would ever be out of a huge crowd. They're just doing some crowd control, trying to keep them at bay.
Pete Rehm says at first everyone in his tour group was feeling celebratory, thinking they'd done a good job in getting their message across. It wasn't until about an hour later that word got to them of what was going on inside that Capitol building. He said the mood turned sour quickly. Also says that he believes it was only a very small percentage of protesters that turned violent. He says that his group was not part of any of that. Reporting live from Baldwin County, 𝐔𝐍𝐏𝐑𝐄𝐂𝐄𝐃, Fox 10 News.
A Twin Cities man has come up with a way to show others that you've gotten the COVID-19 vaccine. Adam Wyatrowski started a new organization to produce these lime green wristbands. He says the idea is to wear them to proudly display that you've been vaccinated and to encourage others to do the same. Kate Raditz shares where we could see the vaccine bands first.
In less than a year after COVID-19 was first discovered, vaccines have already begun being administered, which has caused some hesitation among those concerned about the speed at which the vaccine was created.
I started thinking about ways we could help each other get through COVID and create support for one another.
Adam Wyatrowski has worked in the healthcare industry for 2 decades. Now he's an entrepreneur, starting the organization Courage Through COVID.
We wanted to have a bright color that was noticeable.
And these lime green wristbands. You wear them if you've gotten the vaccine.
I have nurses who are friends and they love the idea.
The goal is to show support for frontline workers and encourage others to also get vaccinated. Courage Through COVID is donating 10,000 of the wristbands to Minnesota hospitals. Adam hopes eventually they will have enough to distribute to pharmacies to give to the general public once the vaccine is more readily available.
One of the things that I like about our country is that everybody has a choice to get vaccinated. We wanted to create this as a positive message.
Already the organization has had some orders from long-term care facilities and a public school. They're also talking with local hospitals and other hospitals around the country. Reporting in Maple Grove, Kate Raditz, WCCO 4 News.
We reached out to several local hospitals to see if there's any kind of official policy to have healthcare workers show whether or not they've gotten the COVID-19 vaccine. They say there currently is not, but say it's common practice to have healthcare workers wear special clips to show they've gotten their flu shot.
Dozens of soldiers with the New Jersey National Guard packed their bags to go to Washington, D.C. this morning. The units based out of Blackwood and Lawrenceville will supplement the D.C. Guard through the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. As Eyewitness News reporter Howard Monroe reports, this was an unexpected call.
I was like, do you see this? I looked at the TV, I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And then
what National Guard First Sergeant Joseph Kern was watching was the U.S. Capitol being taken over. He watched it with his wife, and then his commander called.
My commander doesn't really call for chit-chat. So he calls me, I'm like, hey, what's going on, sir? He's like, hey, Lewd event today, we're going to be activated to go down to D.C.
First Sergeant Kern will lead over 100 soldiers based in Blackwood to Washington, D.C. through President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration. They are among 500 troops from New Jersey who will be supporting the D.C. National Guard with security and protecting monuments and buildings. They'll be there to prevent what happened on Wednesday when the Capitol was stormed, resulting in at least 5 people being killed. They'll also be there to ensure a peaceful transition of power. The last time this unit was deployed was over a year ago to Qatar.
really a mission that means a lot to me because we're taking care of Americans. We're taking care of citizens, which is a good thing.
The deployment hits particularly close. One of the people killed Wednesday was a former New Jersey National Guardsman. To them, Capitol Police Officer Brian 𝐔𝐍𝐏𝐂𝐄𝐄 was Staff Sergeant 𝐔𝐍𝐏𝐂𝐄𝐄. The New Jersey native served in the New Jersey Air National Guard for 6 years. While they don't know what they'll be up against, Kern says his top mission is to get everyone back home.
It's not overseas somewhere, but still I'm responsible for them. So myself and my commander, if we get them all back in one piece, safe, that's a success for me.
In Blackwood, New Jersey, Howard Monroe, CBS 3 Eyewitness News.
New from the night team, one man is in the hospital after being shot by a Phoenix police officer. 911 operators received several calls about a man walking in downtown Phoenix shooting a gun while carrying a baby. Police believe the suspect stopped a car near 6th Avenue in Van Buren and held the driver at gunpoint. The man then turned the gun on police, and that's when one officer fired at him, hitting him at least once. The baby was safely taken into custody. The suspect is currently in critical condition.
First told you last night, Ohio plans to begin Phase 1B later this month. But today, Governor Mike DeWine says although they plan to start the next step in just weeks, it could be a very lengthy process. Phase 1B of the COVID-19 vaccine starts with the most vulnerable, leading into those who are 65 and older, and then in-person school employees.
We hope in approximately 2 weeks from now to be starting in. A lot of this depends on how much we're getting in from the federal government, et cetera. But we hope in about 2 weeks to be starting in on this 1B group.
DeWine says there's more than 2 million people in Phase 1B and plans to set aside 100,000 vaccines the first week for this group. And he stresses the speed of getting the shot depends on how each county is doing with their vaccination efforts and ultimately how much vaccine the state of Ohio is receiving federally. Tri-county health officials say they're still working through Phase 1A, and the governor says counties may simultaneously work to finish vaccinating the first groups while starting on Phase 1B.
Most important thing is to protect lives. Number 2, protect our healthcare workers who are protecting us every day. And 3 is get our kids in school.
The governor says he will be announcing an exact date and some more information on Phase 1B in the coming days.
Tempers flared in Pacific Beach amid clashes between pro-Trump demonstrators and counter-protesters. San Diego police later declared that gathering an unlawful assembly due to acts of violence. Good evening, I'm Vanessa Van Hefty. ABC 10 News reporter Cassie Carlisle spoke with people working in the area who were caught in the middle.
Dueling demonstrations were fired up Saturday afternoon. Antifa pepper spraying Trump supporters, kicking this man, and this group beating up a man who walked away without his shirt covered in pepper spray. Black Lives Matter and Antifa marched from Crystal Pier to Mission Boulevard, right in front of Breakfast Republic.
And we took everybody upstairs and locked the doors.
CEO of Breakfast Republic, Johan Ingman, sent us these photos saying his handful of employees and the manager were locked down for about 2 hours. Neighboring businesses in the same situation.
I'll keep you updated.
Okay, I love you.
All right, love you, bye.
Overhead, Sky 10 showed police separating the two groups. On the ground, police forced the anti-Trump group backward.
We saw them throwing tear gas, and it was just nuts.
Police used multiple crowd dispersion tactics. San Diego PD said they were forced to act after officers were hit with pepper spray, bottles, and rocks. Trump supporters were allowed to march before sunset. As night fell, the crowds died down, leaving business owners anxious.
So now we're just hoping that we don't show up tomorrow with, broken windows and stuff like that.
Keeping a watchful eye on his security cameras. Hopeful everyone goes home and stays there. Cassie Carlisle, ABC 10 News.
And our media partner KPBS watched as protesters were handcuffed. We are working to confirm with SDPD exactly how many people were arrested out there today.
Dozens of people gathered at Minnesota State Capitol today to protest the presidential election results.
USA! USA! USA!
Here's a look at the Stop the Steal rally. You can see lots of American flags there and Trump 2020 flags. This group believes the 2020 election was rigged and unfair and thinks a second term was stolen from President Donald Trump. However, there's no proof of widespread election fraud. People at this rally said despite what happened at the U.S. Capitol this week, They are part of the Party of Law and Order.
What went on at the U.S. Capitol, there was a lot of instigators that were there. And unfortunately, some patriots got caught up in it, caught up in the excitement. A lot of them were lured or fooled into thinking they were participating in something that was positive. Unfortunately, this has been used as a negative against all of us and against the country, and it's sad.
Minnesota's Public Safety Commissioner John Harrington says extra steps were taken to ensure state capitol safety at the rally today. Protesters also made their voices heard in downtown Minneapolis. This group says they're protesting police brutality. This was organized by Black Lives Matter Minnesota and several other groups. It comes after prosecutors decided not to press charges against the officer who shot Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin last year. The group marched from the Hennepin County Government Center to the MPD precinct downtown.
We are demanding a transformative change. We're not asking for one policy change. We're not asking for one officer to be removed. We're asking for this damn system to be held accountable for the injustice they have caused for far too long in this country and in this city.
This group was also rallying for Dalal Eid, who was recently shot and killed by Minneapolis police officers during a traffic stop. MPD officials say he fired at officers first.
Taylor Scott and White tells us they're treating more COVID-19 patients right now than they have at any other point. For 5 days in a row, COVID patients have taken up more than 15% of hospital beds in our 11-county region. If that trend holds for 2 more days, tougher restrictions will be enforced. And that includes suspending elective surgeries. 𝐔𝐍𝐶 Sarah Rahman spoke to doctors who fear this could be the new reality for months.
It was osteoarthritis. It was just that part of the aging process.
Dan Ernst is visiting with his orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Randall Schultz.
I knew it's been coming on for several years.
Because of a halt in elective surgeries, his first knee replacement last April was postponed for months. Now he's facing another delay as he plans surgery for his second knee.
You're always planning time off. You're planning to schedule for rehabilitation, and you're always concerned that there's further deterioration the longer you wait.
On Sunday, local hospitals reported that COVID-19 patients occupied 15% of all staffed beds. Under the governor's orders, if that number doesn't drop for 7 straight days, it would suspend some elective surgeries.
I am notifying people that there's a high probability that they may get canceled.
Dr. Schultz says the last 2 times elective surgeries were suspended, hospitals still allowed some procedures, depending on bed, staffing, and PPE availability. But this time, he says, the surge is different.
They were able to keep some facilities relatively free of COVID patients and concentrate them at some facilities. In this surge, that's really been much more difficult to do.
Tahira Rahman, KXAN News.
Meanwhile, Nevada's vaccine rollout ranks among the worst in the country, and that's according to data from the federal government. As of Friday, more than 170,000 vaccine doses had been delivered to the state, and about 50,000 have been logged as administered. That's about 30%. State health leaders say that number is likely higher once data entry catches up to actual doses given. But still no timeline as to when vaccine distribution will move into those lower tiers.
Unfortunately, we cannot commit to concrete timelines at this point.
As far as my personal colleagues, I have seen hesitancy in some of my colleagues. I have had some people say, well, I think I just want to wait.
That was Dr. Christina Madison from Roseman University, and we asked several hospitals and local ambulance companies about vaccine hesitancy, but they say they're not tracking those who have declined the shot. They add that overall reception of the vaccine has been positive. One solution to vaccinate more people is opening up more distribution sites. The Southern Nevada Health District says they plan to do just that starting next week. And the county says Allegiant Stadium is being looked at as a possible vaccination site.
Our projections after next week, when we are able to open Cashman and expand some of the other sites, is actually to be able to offer at least somewhere between 40 and 45,000 vaccinations a week.
On Monday, the Arizona Cardinals State Farm Stadium will open as a 24-hour vaccination site. There are similar plans for Minute Maid Park, where the Houston Astros play, and other stadiums in Florida and Michigan.
High winds rocking the Southland tonight. In Santa Clarita, a big rig was overturned after heavy winds.
Now to Northridge, the winds there have downed power lines. Fire crews actually cleaning up after it caused trees to light on fire across several properties there.
Well, Texas Republicans spent the day rallying outside the state capitol ahead of the 87th Texas legislative session. Their focus is on urging Republican lawmakers to enact a constitutional conservative legislative agenda. They discussed the redistricting process as well as election integrity, abortion, and gun rights. Texas GOP Chairman Allen West was one of a number of speakers to the crowd.
The most important thing that we need to do is educate and understand this legislative process so that we never see our rights, our freedoms usurped and taken away from us.
And the legislative session starts on Tuesday.
Social media giants Twitter and Facebook have officially suspended President Trump from using their platforms. This, of course, comes after the violence that took place at the U.S. Capitol. News 13's Brady Wakayama spoke with the UNM professor to learn more about the bans. Brady.
Jackie, Professor David Weiss says the news of the social media bans was unprecedented, but believes it was only a matter of time.
If we have a sitting president who is alleged to or accused of inciting violence, especially violence in the U.S. Capitol and prospective violence to members of the government, including even his own vice president, again, we see this crossing a line that has not been crossed before.
Yesterday, Twitter officially announced the @RealDonaldTrump's account was permanently banned from their platform. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg also posted on Thursday they were suspending the president's account for at least 2 weeks until there's a peaceful transition of power. Both platforms say their decisions were stemming from the breach at the nation's capital. Weiss says some people have argued it is against the First Amendment for these companies to ban the president. But Weiss says that's not the case, since they are privately owned and are not government entities.
As a private company, Twitter is within its rights to cancel anyone's account at any time. Twitter has no obligation to let anyone have an account with them. Right? They're not the government, they're a private company.
Weiss says Facebook and Twitter have actually given President Trump more leeway than others over the years since he's the president, and says they warned him several times about violating their company's policies by putting disclaimers and or removing some of his posts that they deemed were verifiably false. However, Weiss says the president still has many other ways to communicate with the public, whether it's using other social media platforms or simply calling for press conferences. Now we asked people on social media what they think of the recent bans, with many split on the matter. Jackie, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Brady. We did reach out to the Republican Party of New Mexico for a comment, but did not hear back.
I assure you, there will be no vaccine sitting on a shelf.
Governor Spencer Cox announced big changes to Utah's COVID-19 vaccination plans today. It comes after Fox 13 News reported earlier this week that vaccine distribution would speed up.
Fox 13's Ben Winslow has the latest developments live from Utah's Capitol Hill. Hi, Ben.
Hi there. Governor Cox announced some major policy changes when it comes to COVID-19 vaccination, but it could mean you get offered the vaccine sooner.
There is nothing more important in any of our careers collectively than what we are doing right now.
Governor Spencer Cox has made no secret of his frustration with the speed of vaccine distribution in Utah.
This virus does not sleep. This virus does not take weekends off, and neither should we. It is unacceptable to have vaccines sitting on the shelf. And moving forward, I assure you there will be no vaccine sitting on a shelf.
So he announced some big changes. The governor is demanding all of Utah's long-term care facilities speed up and complete first dose vaccination by January 23rd. Everyone administering vaccines statewide must report daily how many doses they've given out. Local health departments will now be in charge of vaccine distribution because they can mass inoculate people easier. If you've gotten a positive COVID test in the past 90 days, you'll wait to get vaccinated because you have antibodies. As Fox 13 first reported earlier this week, teachers will be offered the vaccine starting Monday.
1 week later, on January 18th, every Utahn age 70 or older will be eligible to receive the vaccine.
Utah is focusing on age and health risk instead of people's jobs. But the governor will start requiring everyone exhaust vaccine supply in an effort to convince the federal government to give us more doses.
The quicker we use this, that moves all of our timelines up.
The governor has tasked his second in command with making sure vaccination efforts get the help they need.
Governor Cox has asked me to visit sites throughout the state of Utah in the next couple of weeks to see how vaccine administration is going.
Utah is in the midst of a post-holiday surge in cases, with deaths rapidly climbing.
It's clear we've let our guard down, and there is a lot of excitement about the vaccine, but we need to come together again. We need to focus on what we can do as individuals to protect our hospitals by preventing the spread of COVID.
And just a short time ago, the governor signed an executive order removing what he called barriers to faster vaccination. Live on the Hill, Ben Winslow, Fox 13 News, Utah.
A West Virginia lawmaker who took part in the Capitol riots has resigned. Derek Evans posted video showing him entering the Capitol on social media. In a letter to Governor Jim Justice, Evans says his resignation's effective immediately. He faces several federal charges for his role in the rioting.